Hello, and thank you for joining me for Hold the Praise, Try Encouragement Instead. My name is Lauren, and I'm an early learnings community instructor for Access, located in Dearborn. I am here on behalf of United Way, Southeastern Michigan's Early Learning Communities, or ELCs. We collaborate with two other ELCs, Oakland Family Services in Oakland County and Leaps and Bounds in Macomb County. I am happy to facilitate this training today, and I hope we all learn something new together. So this training is titled Hold the Praise, Try Encouragement Instead. Throughout this training, we are going to examine how we communicate with young children, and more importantly, how we acknowledge their efforts as they learn about the world around them. When we are proud of children and their actions or satisfied with their learning outcomes, it's important to let them know, but in an encouraging way. As you watch the presentation, be sure to take notes as they will help you with your homework questions. If you were able to print out the PowerPoint PDF, there's an area on the right side of each slide for jotting down things that are important. I will talk more about the homework towards the end of this presentation. But for now, we are going to review our objectives. We have three objectives today. Objective number 1, we will be able to discuss the negative implications of praise. Objective number 2, we will discuss the benefits of using encouragement. And objective number 3, we will describe the 3 encouragement strategies and how to use them in the classroom. So to start off, I would like to propose a question for you all. And you can reflect on this question, you can think about your ideas, and if you want, you can write them down as well. The question that I am going to ask is, what do you want for children? So take a few seconds to think about what you want for the children in your care, and write those ideas down. These ideas will be there for you to reflect back on later on, and they may assist you with answering your homework questions later on. So what do you want for children? Maybe you want them to be creative, determined. We may want them to have a desire to excel and succeed. We want our children to be visionaries and independent. We don't always want to make learning easy for children. Sometimes materials can be more challenging, or we want to challenge children and encourage them to become more of a risk taker. And we also may want them to be self-confident. So here are a few ideas of what some providers or child caregivers may want for children. And these ideas may not be your ideas, and that's okay. If you wrote down different wants for your children, thank you so much for taking the time to do that. We are going to move on to the next slide, and the next slide will be a short video that dives a little deeper into the importance of encouragement and possibly the negative implications of praise. So let's get started. As you watch the video, please jot down notes. If there are things that stand out to you or things that you want to begin implementing in your own program, please feel free to write those things down. And after the video, we will debrief and move forward with the next slide.
When facilitating trainings with adults, I often ask them, what are their goals for young children? Common answers are self-worth and self-esteem. As early childhood educators, the question then becomes, how do we instill self-esteem in young children?
Yes.
Look what I made.
Oh, how did you make that?
I mean, like this.
You rolled it? With your hand or with the roller?
Right here.
With your hands? Like this?
People often think that if they provide children with praise, that is a step towards self-esteem. So So typical praise comments that are made by adults are things like, "Good job, way to go, beautiful picture, I love your shoes."
There you go, good boy.
And the challenge with this is that it actually is the adults evaluating something from the child and not the child being able to evaluate their own work, their own activities. So the self is taken away from the self-esteem. When adults use evaluative or judgmental comments with young children, it is usually with best intentions.
Barbara, look at my butterfly.
Beautiful.
Adults are trying to provide children with that point of self-esteem, thinking that if they provide the comments and they do the evaluation, the children will feel supportive. The question is there a different approach to be able to put it back in the children's hands and be able to provide that support?
Such an awesome video. Thank you so much for taking time out to watch it. A few things that stood out to me as I watched that video. Automatically, I paid attention to the praises that were expressed to acknowledge the children's actions. If you remember, the little boy was helping the teacher prepare the classroom for meal times, and he placed a plate or a cup on the counter, and she replied, "Good boy." And then there was another clip in the video where a little girl had made a butterfly, and she showed it to her teacher, and her teacher replied, "Beautiful butterfly." And those things stood out to me because automatically I recognize those comments as praise. And I think it stood out to me because they're sort of surface level things, right? They didn't take the time out to notice details or specific things that the child was doing. They automatically went to the quick and easy praise of "good job" or "way to go." And as she stated in the video, that doesn't always help children with self-worth and self-esteem. It actually promotes a reliance on adults, right? Because then the children are looking for the adults to praise them for their work instead of encouraging them and noticing details or specific things about their work. So just for the video, for example, if we didn't want to use praise in those two scenarios that I just talked about, what else could we say instead? If a child is helping you during meal times or any part of the day, instead of saying "good boy" or "good girl," we could simply thank them for their services, right? So thank you so much for setting the table so nicely. I appreciate that. Or thank you for being responsible and putting the plates on the counter. Those are two ideas. For the little girl who created the butterfly, something else we could say instead of "beautiful picture" or "beautiful butterfly" is, "Wow, look at the color paper you used. How did you do that?" Or, "Can you tell me more about that?" Asking the child to give you more information about their ideas or their thoughts is always an effective approach because it puts the conversation and the opportunity to express back into the child's hands. This way, they are able to share with you what they have done and what they thought about as they worked on this particular assignment or task. And that is what they focus on. They don't focus on the praise that comes from the adults. So that's just something to think about and something to keep in mind as we move on to the next slide. The negative implications of praise is praise makes children more dependent on adults. Praise also takes away the children's power to evaluate their own work. It decreases children's confidence in themselves, and it can also produce praise junkies. And this is similar to what I mentioned as far as the video goes. When we are, feeding children with "good job" or "way to go" or "that's beautiful," then they become reliant on it and they look for those things. And if they're always looking for a "good job" or a "way to go" from an adult, then they're not taking the time out to evaluate their own work or see their own efforts in their work. And this is something that we want to pay attention to, something that we want to be mindful of when we are working with young children, because we don't want them reliant on our praises and how we perceive things. We want them to be self-sufficient, and we want them to be confident in their own work and their own abilities. And we also want them to be able to evaluate their efforts and their abilities. So when we use words like good job or that's beautiful, children don't have to think about what they are doing. So going back to the example from the video where the little girl created the butterfly, she didn't really have to think about all of the hard work she put into it, because her teacher or caregiver automatically praised her work by saying, good job. And that does stifle the creative thinking process a little bit. So let's imagine what the little girl may have said if her teacher asked, wow, how did you create that butterfly? Or what materials did you use to make that butterfly? If the teacher had taken that approach, the little girl may have been able to tell her what material she used and why. That is an example of recalling, right? We expect children to remember things that they do in school so that when their parents pick them up or their older siblings pick them up and they ask about their day, they're able to share that information. So we don't want to stifle their creative thinking processes. When children take the time to create pictures, or they put the effort in to their drawings and their artwork, or even helping out a peer or another caregiver in the classroom, that's what we want them to reflect on, right? So instead of resorting to praise and kind of dismissing them, right? Because that's what praise does. It's a good job and, go on, go on back to what you were doing. We want to be more intentional, and we want to ask questions about their thinking process, and we want to encourage them to recall what they did during school hours or with the teacher. In this way, they're able to share those things not only with us as their teachers, but with their families when they go home at the end of the day. When we use words like good job and that's beautiful, we place our judgment on their work. An example of that is in a movie. It's Imagine That with Eddie Murphy, and there's another training that uses a clip from the movie. But what I'm referring to is the little girl is using her imagination, and she goes to get her dad, and she tells them that they have to help the fairy princess in the forest. But they both have to use their imagination. So the little girl is walking through the house, and her dad is following behind her, and he goes, "Oh, what a beautiful forest." And his daughter goes, "It's not beautiful. The forest was just burned down. We have to make it better." So that's just one example of when we assume children want to hear, "Oh, what a beautiful thing," or "What a good job you did." We quickly learn that that's not what they were intended to do. That's not their intention. We place our judgment on their work when we say things like "good job" or "beautiful picture," and that takes away from their self-confidence and their self-worth, right? So we want to put it back in their hands, and we want them to be able to evaluate their own efforts and their own work. And a way that we can do that is by getting rid of praise and trying encouragement instead. So when a student is proud of something that they've done and they bring it to you to show you, try to ask a question to get more information about what they did, instead of resorting to "great job" or "that's a beautiful picture." There are negative implications of praise. Children may internalize, "I'm a good, lovable person if I listen," or "if I eat all my food." So when we praise children for certain things, for example, being kind to their peers or eating all of their food, they may begin to think that they are only good and they are only worthy when they do those things. Another negative implication of praise is it discourages risk-taking, right? If our children are reliant on our praise and they are always looking for us to say, good job, or way to go, or beautiful picture, then they don't want to take the risks to be creative or think and step outside of the box, right? Another negative implication of praise is it lessens self-motivation and it discourages problem solving. It also it doesn't help with the children's self-esteem. Adults tend to believe that praise helps with their self-esteem, but that is not true. And that is why we are going to take a look at the next video, which will dive a little bit deeper into the negative implications of praise. Again, as you watch this video, jot down things that stand out to you. If there are little messages or things that you want to take back to your center, please feel free to write those things down and we will debrief after.
Let's look first at how praise can lessen children's self-motivation and may discourage problem solving and risk-taking. When children are constantly praised for performing tasks, they may be less likely to try new ideas beyond what they already know they can do. When children are constantly praised for their work, they may be afraid to challenge themselves. What if I won't be complimented on my new ideas? Or worse, what if I'm criticized for the risk-taking or the choices that I'm making? When we tell children, good job, we unintentionally stifle their motivation for excelling. If a child encounters a problem in play, they may feel there is no need to solve that problem because they've already been told they've done a good job. Or they may feel if they try something new and fail, they'll no longer have the status of having done a good job.
Judgmental praise can also make children dependent on adult approval and take away children's power to evaluate their work.
All the blue ones, very good.
Most teachers and parents of preschoolers want their children to be more independent. Do we move away from that goal by praising children to the point where they depend on adults to tell them how their work and efforts should be?
How about their napkins? Very good.
Given too much judgmental praise, children may begin to depend on the teachers or parents to evaluate what is good or bad, which prevents them from making decisions and choices about their own work.
You're doing such a nice job, Heidi, of getting those napkins taken apart.
We want each child to become the source of his or her own approval, rather than always waiting eagerly for ours.
Good job! Yay!
All right, so thank you so much for taking a few minutes out to watch that video. I hope that you were able to write down some things that stood out to you, a few messages to reflect back on. Another thing that I noticed as I watched the video is a familiar clip where the children are in the classroom assisting the teacher with preparing for mealtime. And again, I heard a lot of good job or very good. And those are examples of praise. When we are happy or satisfied with what children are doing, we want to encourage them in a way that motivates them to keep the momentum up, right? So instead of saying very good or a good job, we could have said, wow, you made sure that there were enough napkins for all of your friends. Or the teacher could have acknowledged what she saw the little girl doing. I see that you are counting individual napkins out and putting them in individual places for your peers. When we do that, the children are then able to think, oh, that is what I'm doing, right? Versus, I did a good job. It's a little bit more for them to reflect back on. And I think that it provides a higher expectation, right? So instead of the little girl looking forward to hearing good job from her teacher, the next time she assists, she may already know that she needs to count out individual napkins for her peers. And that is an effective way of helping her teacher prepare for meal times. Another thing that may happen if we encouraged her or encourage children versus praising them is they will want to do even better the next time that they complete a task for their friends or for their teachers. When we resort to praise, it can sometimes cause anger and resentment, especially when we use it to manage or manipulate children. And an example of this is, I like the way little Johnny is sitting at the table. Oh, I like the way little Brandon is sitting at the table. And instead of saying what we like, we could simply thank the children for doing what is expected of them, or for following the classroom rules and being a responsible community member, right? Because when they're in school, it's a community. They have their peers surrounding them. They have their teachers surrounding them. So instead of saying, I like that, or I like what you're doing, we could simply acknowledge what they're doing and thank them for that. We could also encourage responsibility by simply telling the children that they are being responsible and following the rules and the expectations of the classroom. Another negative implication of praise and reward is that it is external motivation. And when we say external motivation, that means the motivation is not coming from the child, it's coming from people outside of the child. So the teacher or the caregiver who is praising the child. It's an external motivation, and we want to encourage children to think for themselves. We want to encourage them to take risks and to be creative in their work, and that has to come from inside of the children. So what we want instead of external motivation is internal motivation. And this is also similar to heuristic play, where we want to encourage children to learn and discover the world on their own. And we want them to have that intrinsic motivation. The intrinsic motivation comes from inside of the children, and they are doing things simply because they know that they are good at them, or they love to do these things. And that's what we want to promote and encourage. We don't want to praise. Because another negative implication of praise is adults can sometimes manipulate children with praise and rewards, and then in return, children learn to manipulate adults. And then that makes sense because what we give out, we get back. And it does start early on, right? It does start when children are younger. So instead of manipulating them with praise and rewards, let's try encouraging them and describing what they're doing to motivate them to continue that action. Here we'll have another short video. Again, please take some time to jot down things that stand out to you, anything that resonates, or even new ideas that you want to take back to your classroom. After the video, we will come back and debrief.
Many people are surprised when I tell them that praise can cause resentment, anger, and competition amongst children when used as a behavior management tool. Sometimes we as adults, we use praise as a behavior management tool to try to manipulate children to do things that we want them to do. In my early years of teaching, I can remember I used to try to get children to clean up because I had a problem with them not wanting to clean up at cleanup time. So I would do things and say, way to go, good job, I'm glad you're cleaning up, to try to get them to clean up. I even used to sing a song to help motivate them.
Somebody's cleaning up the room. Somebody's picking up the toys. Somebody's picking up the toys. Who is it?
That's exactly what
Douglas!
She was looking.
Well, I did that song in hopes that other children would hear their names and want their names called too to clean up. But what I was really actually doing, in fact, was using praise as a manipulation tool and really just creating competition and anger and resentment amongst the children in the classroom. And that's not really what I wanted to do. So, you know, I was trying to nurture a classroom where they would have that sense of community. But by doing that, I was actually breaking down that sense of community.
Thank you again for watching that video. I hope that everyone was able to jot down something that resonated with them. Something that stood out to me as I was listening to the video is I love that the teacher talked about her early years. And I love that she was able to reflect back on her teaching days when she did use praise. And I also appreciate that she was able to recognize that it wasn't helpful and that it was a little manipulative for children. I will speak for myself, and I will say that I have used praise before. Before I understood the negative implications of praise, it was my go-to. It was easy and effective to quickly tell a child, good job, or way to go, because then they would take their paper and they would go put it away, and there was no more conversation. And I could tend to the other students in my classroom, or I could clean up the paint that was spilled in the art area. So when she talked about that, it made me reflect back on my earlier days of teaching and when I first began teaching. And it's important to evolve and grow as a teacher. Just because you start out doing something doesn't mean that there isn't room to improve that method or strategy, or to evolve and go outside of that method and strategy and do something totally different. I could also appreciate her admitting that she would sing a song, and then they showed her singing the song, and she calls out the child's name who's cleaning up, and there was no reaction from the children. None of the children were excited to have their name called. I didn't notice the children look up at the teacher, and I didn't see a motivation for other children to clean up more than what they were already doing. It seemed like they weren't really fazed by the song or the praise. And that's something to pay attention to as well. When children aren't moved or affected by praise, then that should tell you that a different approach may be needed. So again, thank you so much for watching the video. If you did not notice the things that I noticed, please feel free to rewatch it again, and maybe you'll see something new that you didn't see before. We are going to move on to the next slide. In this slide, we will talk about examples of praise and rewards. So here's a question that I would like to ask, and you can reflect on your answer and think of your ideas for this question, or you can write it down. The question is, when do you see or hear adults using praise or rewards with children? Speaking for myself, when I first entered the classroom, I would see and hear adults using praise or rewards with children whenever the children were doing something that the adults wanted them to do. And an example could be cleanup time, or putting personal items in a cubby and then going to sit down. Another time that I have seen adults use praise or rewards with children is during outside time. If they meet the expectations of the adults, then it's a good job, or way to go, awesome job, good boy, good girl. So those are my examples. I wonder what some of you all were able to write down or reflect back on as far as adults using praise and rewards with children. And if you can't think of other adults, reflect on yourself and think about how often or when you may use praise with children. The next question, what are the consequences for children and adults when praise and rewards are used frequently? So as you're writing down that question or reflecting back on that question, I am going to talk a little bit about what she mentioned in the video. And when we talked about manipulation, sometimes the consequences for children and adults when praise and rewards are used frequently is manipulation. And if adults are consistently using praise and rewards to manipulate children, children in return will use praise and rewards to manipulate adults. Give some specific examples of what adults say and do when using praise or rewards. So we know that the most infamous example of praise is a good job or good boy, good girl, way to go, I love it, yay. And those things are very surface level. Again, they're not describing what the child did well or what we love about the child. It's just praise, right? And this is why, instead of using praise, we can use encouragement instead. Now, I know that when you have been doing things for a long time, a certain way, it becomes a habit. And habits are hard to break sometimes. But using encouragement instead of praise is very simple when we are intentional about acknowledging the children's efforts and actions. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So here are the alternatives to praise. We said it's as easy as 1, 2, 3, and we have 3 encouragement strategies. So instead of walking around the children or, standing over the children, the first thing that we can do as an alternative is participate in the children's play. When you're participating in the children's play, you are sitting down with them. If you're not on the floor, you're in a child-sized chair. This means that you're at their level. This makes it easier for you to hear them and them to hear you. It also makes the child feel more comfortable, right? When they know that their caregiver or their teacher is sitting beside them and is close to them versus standing over them or hovering over them, because that can be a little intimidating for adults and children. So the first step in not using praise, but encouragement instead, is participating in children's play. The second step is encourage children, and encourage children by describing their efforts, their ideas, and products. The third step, acknowledge children's work and ideas by making specific, descriptive comments. So let's give a little example of this. Let's say we have a child who just painted a picture, and this child used red, blue, and yellow to paint his picture. He brings it to the teacher and he says, look, teacher, look at my picture. Instead of saying, wow, that's a beautiful picture, or good job, what else could we say? Well, if the picture was painted and we were not able to participate in the children's play, the first thing that we can do is acknowledge that we see paint. So we weren't able to paint with the child, but we noticed that they did use paint. So what we could say is, wow, I see that you used the paint from the art area to make your picture. That's one step. The next step would be to encourage children to describe their ideas. So after you acknowledge what they've used to create their picture, you could ask them, what did you make? Or can you tell me about this picture? And that's going to open up the door for children to communicate and share with you their thoughts and their ideas and their steps that they took to create this picture. After they share those things with you, you can acknowledge their work and ideas by making specific and descriptive comments. So, wow, I see that you used paint from the art area. I noticed blue, red, and yellow on your picture. Can you tell me what this is? Or, how long did it take you to make this picture? Right? So we ask questions that show the children we are interested in what they are doing. We are interested in their ideas and their thinking processes and how they express themselves and interpret things in their own way. And it is way more effective than saying, that's a beautiful picture. Good job. Right? And if you think about it as an adult, how many of us would want to hear good job from our supervisors or our directors or bosses? I don't know that that would make me feel proud of my hard work and my effort or the services that I provide. I would want a little bit more. And I honestly believe that children do too. And if they don't, it is important for us as their adults in their environment or as their teachers to introduce that to them so that when they grow older, they expect more in return for their actions and their efforts and their services as well. Good job or way to go simply is not enough. We want to try encouragement instead. We are going to take a look at another video with Miss Kay, and she is going to talk about her experience with using these 3 strategies as an alternative to praise. Jot down things that stand out to you, anything that resonates. If there's something that you want to take back to your classroom, please feel free to write that down or just reflect back on it so that you're able to recall it later. And we will begin the video.
As a Head Start teacher, there was a child in my Head Start class that was drawing a picture. And I walked up to him with all of the enthusiasm that I could muster, and I said to him, "What a beautiful picture." Well, he looked at me with a sadness in his eyes and said, "It's not supposed to be beautiful. It's a monster." I felt really bad at that point, so I tried to redeem myself by looking at him and saying, "Oh, well, tell me about your monster." Well, he looked even sadder at that point and said, "Can't you see that he's mad and angry?" At this point, I just wanted to go somewhere and sit down because I really felt bad that, at this point, what I said to the child is that I didn't really pay attention to what he was doing. So what really made me feel bad is what I saw in his eyes was the fact that he thought that he was not even important enough to me for me to even look at what he was actually doing. Had I taken the time to really look at his drawing and to make comments about those large, black, huge strokes that I'll never forget, we could have had a conversation, the two of us, about how angry this kid was, and we could have problem solved and worked through that anger. But instead, I wasted an opportunity with an empty praise statement as, "What a beautiful picture." And this was truly a lesson learned for me, one that I will never forget, one that led me to believe that these encouragement strategies were important enough for me to take a look at, because I never ever wanted to make a child feel the way that child felt that day.
All right. So that was Miss Kay, and she was sharing an experience that she had with her children in her classroom. And she talked about a little kid or a little boy showing her a picture of a monster. Excuse me. And before she asked the little guy about his picture, or before she had information on what the picture was, she assumed that the child wanted to hear beautiful picture or good job. And then she quickly realized that that was not what the child was looking forward to. And she also realized mistakes that she had made when she paid attention to how the child responded. I can appreciate that Miss Kay talks about learning a valuable lesson. And I can also appreciate that she was able to notice where she may have went wrong and the opportunities that she may have missed out on because she chose to use an empty praise statement, such as beautiful picture, instead of taking the time to ask the child about his picture. So I have a question for you. How many of you have experienced something similar to what Miss Kay, the teacher from the video, just shared? I've had those experiences in the classroom as well, especially in my earlier days when I was being introduced to high scope and learning about the curriculum. It was all really new to me. And it honestly was really strange to hear that children don't like praise statements. And I think it was strange for me because growing up as a child, I loved hearing good job or way to go. And as an adult now, I can reflect back on that and realize it was because I was relying on those things. I needed those things to motivate me. I needed my teacher to tell me I was doing a good job because that became my motivation to continue doing a good job. And it wasn't until I began studying child development and teaching in Head Start programs and utilizing the high scope curriculum that I realized how negative my experiences were with praise and how it impacted me and how I think as an adult. So I've used praise before. I wasn't always well versed in the negative implications of praise or how it can impact children negatively. I was simply doing what I experienced growing up. I was doing what my teachers did and what my parents did. And honestly, as childcare providers, that is what we resort to when we don't have the information on newer strategies. We resort to what we saw growing up or what our parents did and what our teachers did. And as I said before, it is important to evolve beyond those things, right? Because the world changes, children change, and as they change, their needs change. And as their needs change, we have to change and evolve to meet those needs. So thank you again for watching the video. If there's something that you missed or you want to review the video again, you are able to. If you were able to jot down notes from the video that resonated with you, thank you. And I hope that you're able to use those things in your program. For now, we are going to move on to the next slide. So here's another strategy that we can use. And this is for the first step of using encouragement instead. When we're participating in children's play, we want to use something called SOUL. SOUL is an acronym for silence, observation, understanding, and listening. So before we enter a child's play, we want to quiet our mouths and our minds and be silent. As we are quiet and sitting with the children, we want to observe what they are doing. And then we want to seek an understanding of what they are doing by listening to what they say as they play. An example of this is, let's say we have children playing in the block area and we're interested in what they're building. As a teacher, we may go over, sit on the floor with them, or bring a child-sized chair with us. We sit quietly and we simply watch what they're doing. We listen to understand their thinking and their thought processes and their ideas, and then we are able to become a partner in their play. When we become a partner in their play, we can imitate their actions, we can use the materials in the same way that they do, and we can also assume a role in their pretend play. A lot of times in my experience, when I go over, or when I used to go over to children who were playing in the block area using SOUL, I would sit down next to them and I would wait for them to acknowledge my presence. And sometimes they may say, "Hey, Miss Lauren," or "Miss Lauren, do you want to play?" And I would always wait for the invite first. Once I became accustomed to using SOUL, I would wait for the invite. And once I was invited, I already had an understanding of what they were doing because I sat silently and I listened to them and I watched them. I overheard them talking about building a garage for all of the cars. So I had an understanding of what they were doing. And when they invited me to play, I could assume that role, in their pretend play. So SOUL is a great strategy to use when you want to participate in a child's play. Participating in children's play says to them, "I'm really interested in what you are doing. I'm so interested that I want to try it too." That makes children feel really good when adults or people that they look up to are interested in what they're doing. They feel valued and they may think, "Wow, I must be doing something great. My teacher wants to copy me." So for step 2, for using encouragement instead of praise is encourage children to describe their own efforts, ideas, and products. Ask open-ended questions about their work, their process, or ideas. So, what are you working on? Wow, can you tell me what you're building? I wonder what you're going to paint with green, yellow, and red paint. You could also ask genuine questions that relate directly to what children are doing and or their thought process. So if you are silently observing children in play and you want to ask a genuine question, you could ask a question based off what you've observed or what you see as you're silently watching them play. Let's say, for example, we have a little girl in the art area and she is using stickers to make a collage. A genuine question that we could ask her is, how many stickers are you going to use for your collage? Or, what are you making? Can you tell me about that? Or, wow, I noticed you have 10 stickers on your collage. I wonder what you will do next. And those are things that motivates children to think about what they're going to do next. And they're probably even more excited about it now because they have the attention of the teacher and their teacher is interested, and that's motivating. The next thing we want to do is make observational comments about their work process and or ideas. So if you are walking over and you witness the end of a child's play, right? Maybe it's right before cleanup time and they have completed their garage in the block area with the blocks and cars. You didn't see the process, but you're walking over towards the end. If you don't know what they made or you didn't see the steps that they took or the efforts that they put into the garage, you could just make a comment about their work or process. You could say something like, wow, I noticed you worked in the block area for 20 minutes. You must have worked on something really hard, or you've put a lot of effort into what you built. Wow, look at how much time you took out to make this garage or to create this building. And those are just observational comments about their work, their process, or their ideas. You can't go wrong when you simply state or describe what's in front of you. So instead of, resorting to, wow, look at that beautiful garage, or that's a beautiful painting, just make a comment about what they're doing. You can talk about how long they painted, or the colors that they use, or the type of utensil they use to paint. For the example with the boys or the children in the block area, you could talk about the peers that they choose to play with and how kind they are to their friends and how well they work together. Those are encouraging statements and expressions that motivate children to continue to meet the expectations, not only the teacher's expectations, but their own expectations as well. So when we describe their efforts to them, they may hear and feel a few things. They may feel and hear that the teacher is interested in what they are doing. They may also feel proud of themselves from within, and that goes back to the intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from inside of a person, and they are doing something really well simply because they love to do it, and that's all the motivation that they need. Praise is external motivation. It's something that has to come from someone outside of ourselves, outside of the children. And as we have talked about on previous slides, it can have a negative impact on children and their self-worth and their confidence. So when we describe their efforts to them, instead of praising them, they feel proud of themselves from within. And something that I have for an example of this is, instead of telling a child, you are proud of them, tell the child that they should be proud of themselves. Encourage that intrinsic motivation by telling them, you must feel really proud of yourself, or you should feel really proud of yourself. You worked really hard on that. And that's a good start. For the third step, in trying encouragement instead of praise, we acknowledge children's work and ideas by making specific and descriptive comments. We talk about what children are doing. We want to be as specific as possible when we are describing what they see. You can even repeat or restate the children's words. So if you wait for children to share with you what they did, you could just repeat it back to them. For example, a child may come over and say, "Hey, Miss Lauren, I painted a flower." And in response to that, you could say, "Wow, you did paint a flower," or "I do see a flower on your paper." And that is more motivating than "Beautiful picture," or "Good job," right? When we acknowledge their work and we make specific descriptive comments about it, we focus on the process and the effort of the work and not the child. So we can acknowledge children's work by saying, "Look at that deep blue sky," or "You used a lot of colors today," or "You've been working on that a long time on that building. You've been working a long time on that building." So with these acknowledgments, we are simply commenting on what we see. We are being descriptive by naming colors or naming the amount of time that they spent on something. And that's a positive way to acknowledge children. Efforts and their actions and their work. You are able to make meaningful and specific comments about the children's work when you look at what they have done and you say exactly what you see, or you repeat exactly what the child has said to you. So what children may hear or feel when teachers or adults acknowledge their efforts with specific comments, they may hear and feel that they can recognize the truth about themselves. They can also see the value and worth in what they have done. And this is why it is important to encourage children versus praising children. When adults describe children's efforts, "I see that you've put all the train tracks you were playing with, you put on your jacket, and you are ready to go outside." So when we acknowledge children's efforts to follow the daily routine and to stay on schedule and to meet the expectations of the classrooms, we want to state exactly that. We don't want to praise them and say, "Good job," or "Good job for putting on your jacket. Now you're ready to go outside." We want to acknowledge what we see them doing, because it's the act that is demonstrating how responsible they can be. And it's their efforts that's demonstrating that they want to succeed in the classroom and that they want to meet the expectations that their teachers set for them. Children may also see value and worth in themselves when we describe their efforts. They will, in return, know how to plan ahead and be responsible. So when we tell children, "Thank you for being responsible. I noticed you put your jacket away after you took it off," that will encourage them to put their jacket away every day after recess time, because they are responsible and not doing a good job, right? So even another thing that I noticed when we use descriptive statements is we are providing a richer vocabulary for children. So when they go home to their parents, they're not saying, "Good job, mommy." They're probably saying, "You are so responsible," you know? And we love to hear children using those words to describe themselves and their family members or their peers. So we want to be the example and provide that for them when we are encouraging their actions, their efforts, and their learning in the classroom. Here we have another short video. Please take some time to jot down things that stand out to you. After the video, we will debrief and move forward with the next slide.
The first strategy is to participate in children's play. Before participating in children's play, be silent, observe, understand, and listen.
You're making the balls? Like this?
By incorporating these practices as you work with the children, you will learn what type of play they are engaged in and how to enter in and be a partner in their play.
Let me see, what are we doing now? Oh, he's rolling it. Oh, that's how you make it nice and round.
Begin working side by side and quietly imitate the children's actions. For example, use the Play-Doh in a similar way.
Justin. It's nice. Now, what is it? What do we make? A weight. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. I see.
Let's make a look at that.
Build a simple tower of blocks like the children.
Oh.
or assume a role in their pretend play.
Well, hippos make choices on their own, and I'm looking for some mud.
Matching the level of complexity of the children's play and generally following their lead also helps make you a partner in their play.
Tell me what this is.
It's a new fire-breathing dragon.
Wow.
Our second strategy is to encourage children to describe their efforts, ideas, and products. This strategy encourages children to feel good about their work and ideas. By using this strategy, adults help children feel a sense of control over their lives.
And you figured out how to make them stick together.
Yeah, because my mom knows how to.
That one's going to go underneath.
This is going to be another rocket. I mean, this. Oh.
Encouraging children to describe their efforts, ideas, and products helps children become more deeply involved in what they are doing and also promotes language skills and comprehension.
I decided to put it right up there on top.
I made the new fire-breathing dragon.
A new fire-breathing dragon.
Big.
It is big.
Started out small.
What was the first thing you had to do to make your CD player?
Put Play-Doh on it.
You had to put Play-Doh on it first? Then what?
Adults in high-scope classrooms carry out this strategy by asking open-ended questions, questions without a predetermined correct answer about children's work or ideas.
After that,
But the paper didn't work.
the paper didn't work, so what did you do instead?
You can also encourage children by asking genuine questions that relate directly to what the children are doing and their thought processes.
Play-Doh, then the glue, then you tried paper, but the paper didn't work. How come the paper didn't work?
Because there wasn't very much glue on it.
Oh.
It takes careful observation to do this. Again, be silent, observe, understand, and listen to learn how to engage the children in a conversation about their work.
I'm just learning about what they've done.
So as not to bombard children with questions, you can start out your conversation with an observational comment about the children's work.
Rings on the top.
No, this is not top, it's the bottom.
Oh, this is the oh, now I get it. This is the bottom of the bus. So these
Our wheels.
are the wheels. So to make the bus, first you had to turn it upside down. And when it's ready, you're going to tip it up again.
Notice how this strategy of encouragement opens up a true dialogue between the adult and the child.
That's the horn? So does that mean that's the front of the bus? And tell me more. And this is the back.
The child realizes that the adult is interested in what he's doing, which helps to encourage the child in describing his work and efforts, all the while feeling a sense of pride that comes from within.
And there's headlights in the front too. What did you use for headlights?
Tape.
The third encouragement strategy is to acknowledge children's work and ideas by making non-judgmental descriptive comments.
I didn't know that megasaurs had shells of fish on them.
This one is a special one.
By realistically describing children's work, adults help preschoolers understand their strengths and weaknesses and learn how to evaluate themselves.
I can get on it.
Really? How do you get on it? I don't see any doors.
Just like the other two encouragement strategies, this strategy takes careful observation. When acknowledging children's work and ideas, talk about what the children are doing by describing what you see.
Looks like you're squeezing really hard, Kevin.
Yeah.
Look what you made. You used pink paper strips and some staples.
I know.
You knew that already?
Instead of treating every piece of artwork as a masterpiece, talk about the facts. Focus on what the child is doing, not on the child.
And look what you made. I see pink and blue paper strips here with staples, and purple and two different kinds of green with staples.
Girl, look what I made.
How did you do that, Daniel?
Using this particular strategy will help you describe what the children are doing rather than evaluating what they are doing. The kind of encouragement that truly builds self-esteem comes in two parts. First, the adult describes what the child has done.
There are knots all in this one. In the yard? Right here and here and here?
Second, the child, after hearing her accomplishment described to her, sees value and self-worth in herself.
So that was part of making this knot up here?
No, this.
The teacher has given the child specific information about what she has done that is valuable. The phrase "good job" does not communicate what is good.
Oh my goodness, and a spider in the middle of your table.
Thank you again for watching that video. I hope there were some things that stood out to you or things that you noticed were effective, strategies that were effective with the children that you may want to take back to your program. Something that I noticed in comparison to the videos that we watched in the beginning is that I didn't hear any praise in these videos. And something else that I noticed is that the teachers addressed the children by names. I didn't hear, good boy or good girl. I heard names being called. And I think that that's wonderful because it gives children a sense of identity. It builds their self-confidence, and it also lets them know who they are. They're more than a good girl or a good boy. Something else that I noticed is that all of the teachers were really interested in what their children were doing. In the first video or the first clip of the video where the teacher was playing with Play-Doh, she asked this child, well, how did you roll it? Did you use your hands or did you use the roller? She didn't assume that the child used the roller just because it was there. She asked, and she found out that the child actually used her hands. And once she realized that the child used her hands, she began playing with the Play-Doh and molding it with her hands in the same way. So not only were the teachers interested in what the children were doing, they also modeled that play back to them, or they copied how the children were playing, because that's also a way to show children that you're interested in what they're doing or that you like what they're doing. We don't always have to tell them we like it or say good job. We can show them that we are interested or we like something by participating or asking to come into their play. So that video reviewed the 3 steps that we went over on the previous slides. And there were also some really great examples of what each step looks like in a classroom or a childcare setting. So again, I hope that there was something that you all noticed in that video that stood out to you. And I hope that there are things that you will take back to your program, your program after this training. So we are no longer using praise. We are using encouragement instead. Instead of saying, good job, think and ask yourself, what is it about the job that is good? So if a child does exactly what you ask them to, or they do exactly what they are expected to do, what's good about that? Because we don't want to say, good job, or way to go. We want to point out and describe what we are happy with or what we are proud of, or we want to shed light on what we want the children to notice so that they are proud of those things and so that they can be happy with themselves as well. So if the child goes to the cubby and they put their jacket away, instead of saying good job, you can say, I noticed that you put your jacket away after you took it off. And you could thank them for being responsible. Thank you for being so responsible and putting your jacket where it goes. When we're distinguishing praise from encouragement, we also want to ask ourselves, what does that statement promote? Self-determination is something that we want to think about. And we want to ask, are we helping the child feel a sense of control over his or her life? Are we helping the child make his or her own judgments? Are we helping the child choose what kind of person to be? So if you resort to good job or way to go, how does that help the child feel a sense of control over his or her life? What is that telling that child? And how does it help the child make his or her own judgments? Distinguishing praise from encouragement, you could also ask yourself, does that statement promote intrinsic motivation? Are we creating conditions for the child to become more deeply involved in what he or she is doing? Changing praise to encouragement may look or sound like this. Here we have a picture of a little girl, and she's wearing a dress. The dress is beautiful. It is. But when she goes to the teacher and she says, "Look at my new dress," the adult makes a praise statement and says, "I love your pretty new dress." If you pay attention to what the child says, she only said, "Look at my new dress," right? She didn't ask for praise or even acknowledgement. She just wanted the teacher or the adult to see it. So instead of praising her and saying, "I love your pretty new dress," we could try encouragement instead. So we would make an encouraging statement. And this statement would probably repeat exactly what the child said and offer an opportunity for the child to share more about what they are sharing with you. So in this case, it's the new dress. The child says, "Look at my new dress." The adult could say in an encouraging way, "You have a new dress. Tell me more about it." So you're restating the child's words, and then you are creating the opportunity for the child to share what they think about the dress, because ultimately that's what's important. How does the child see it? How does the child feel about wearing the dress, and what do they think about the dress? Change praise to encouragement. So here's another example where a child has painted a picture and he comes to the teacher and he says, "Look at my painting." The adult makes a praise statement and says, "It's so beautiful." What else could the adult have said? Instead of praising, the adult could have made an encouragement statement and said, "You're really proud of the hard work you put into your painting. I can tell." And one way that we could tell that he's proud is because he's showing it off. He's bringing it to the teacher to show her or him. And we can acknowledge that in itself. And by saying, "I can tell that you're really proud of all the hard work you put into your painting." And that gives the self-confidence and self-worth back to the child. And then they are able to focus on the efforts that they put into it and not the external motivation that the adult gives to it. Focus on the effort of the work when you are encouraging young children. Changing praise to encouragement could also sound like this. The child says, "Come see the castle I built." And the adult says, "Wow, good job." We know that that's praise, right? And instead of saying that in response to a child showing you something that they worked really hard on, we could say, "Oh, how did you make your castle?" And with that, we have the child describe his or her efforts, ideas, and products. So, reflecting back, thinking of the many negative implications of praise discussed today, my hope is that you will be even more intentional in utilizing some of these encouragement strategies. Please be sure to submit your homework to the email address found in your confirmation email. Once this is done, you will receive